Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and it's time to get you good folks ready for week 3 of the fantasy football season. The sample sizes of data are slowly growing, but it's still not time to overreact to performances at this point in the season, even though it's tempting. Even if you're 0-2 on the year, there's still plenty of time to right the ship and get back on track for the rest of the season. And that's why we're going to go game by game once again to preview the week, hit on as many of the important IDP topics worth discussing, and make sure you have all the info you need to come away with a W in week 3. So let's get it. All right, so let's get her going here for week 3. We've got a full slate of games to go through. And as always, I could not do this alone. So I had to bring on another one of the great minds of the world of IDP, a first-time guest. If you're on IDP Twitter or paid attention at all to the IDP show, which I'd hope you would, then you might likely be familiar with our next guest from a number of their great videos and content over there, which includes the IDP Minute from this offseason, where he covers the top IDP news of the day in around 2 minutes. And luckily for us, we have him for a lot more than 2 minutes. The great Jeff Pomazal. Jeff, awesome to finally get you on the show, man. How you doing?
I am stoked for this. That intro just hits hard every single time. And then knowing that I was going to get a chance to be on, it hit even harder. So I appreciate having me on.
Nice, man. Yeah, everybody loves the music. I'm a big fan of it too. It always gets me in the mood to talk some IDP, and maybe play some video games after that. But mostly just to focus on some IDP right. And some football. But yeah, this will be good, man. This is your first time on the show, and I'm glad that we get you for a nice chunk of time here to go game by game in season, preview the week, and pick your brain and get your thoughts on a lot of these IDPs. This will be nice.
Excellent. Yeah, I was thinking about playing a little Tecmo Bowl and getting my notebook out, keeping stats myself. So here we go.
Yeah. That's the way to do it, man. Nothing gets you in the mood to talk more football than that. But yeah, man. So for anybody that's tuning in maybe for the first time, just how this kind of works, we're going to go game by game. We're going to hit on the key topics that need dissecting, which means that we might not be covering, like always, some of the more obvious names at the position, or at least in great detail, like the Fred Warners, Roquan Smiths, TJ Watts of the world, right? Because you know that you should be starting them already. We don't need to tell you that. So we're more focusing on everyone else that kind of needs some actual analysis to help you set your lineup. So buckle in. Get ready, because we've got a lot to go through. But before we do, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats. Which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns? Which quarterbacks threw for less than 350 yards? Think you can pick who will do what before kickoff? Then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for all the first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Not withdrawable. Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, Jeff, let's do this. I should mention for the YouTube crowd that you'll once again see the matchup data on the screen for like tackles allowed and pressure to sack conversion rate for the quarterback, stuff like that. Fine to use it. I probably reference it a little bit. Just keep in mind, it's a small sample size. So far from, the be all end all of data points at this point in the year, basically. But Jeff, we'll get right into it here. You have the pleasure of kicking us off here for week 3 with the AFC East clash on Thursday night between the New England Patriots and the New York Jets. Any IDPs in this matchup that catch your eye worth discussing?
Yeah, a couple of kind of big things here. I like Keon White has just been having an outstanding start to the season. He's playing a ton of snaps, obviously with the injuries that they sustained. Christian Barmore is out with his blood clot issues and things like that, but he's just been seeing a ton of snaps. He's played in 121, or the Patriots have had 121 snaps this season. He has 99. He's been on the field, so not quite Max Crosby type territory yet, but that's a ton of snaps for a defensive lineman to be playing, and he's turned it into some pretty good success. He's had 8 pressures, 5 sacks, and 3 hurries. So obviously he's doing very well with the snaps that he's on the field, and with the injuries, I just think he's just going to continue to rack up snaps. He's available in a ton of leagues. I saw in a couple leagues in my own that he was getting picked up yet this morning. So if he's on your waiver wires anywhere, I'd definitely be putting him in your lineup easily. Defensive end 2 territory for me for sure. So
yeah, that's exactly where I have him this week as well. Like he looks really good. I mean, he was on the waiver wire list like coming out of week 1. Again, like you mentioned, he had that big game. Does it again in week 2, 83% snap share last week. Like he's got a 90.8 pass rush grade on the year as well, which is 4th at the position. So he's looking like a legitimate IDP option basically on any given week. I think I have him as edge 17. Basically, the only reason he's not like top 15 is just the tougher matchup against Tyron Smith on a shorter week. But Aaron Rodgers has a tendency to take some sacks here early on as well. So could be another nice week here for Keion White. I like that call.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, like, Thursday night games always seem to disappoint somehow, and so it's always, like you said, the short week is just a tough one to come back from. So I totally get that. So yeah, I always kind of have to try to find ways to temper expectations for every IDP or for any fantasy option on Thursday night. It's just, it sets you up for disappointment for the rest of the week, really, to sit there for like 3 days before your next players play and have to stare at like a goose egg or something like that. It's really, really frustrating. But the other thing here for New England too, Jeff, how are you feeling about Jelani Tavai? Because Jawan Bentley got some kind of a shoulder issue. It sounds like it's serious. He's at least going to miss some time, right? So Tavai stepped in, played 100% of snaps in his absence. He made the waiver wire targets this week as well. Any interest in like starting Jelani Tavai if you have to? Yeah, I have him in my linebacker 3 territory right now. New England hasn't always been like the sexiest of places for linebackers to play. And even when Bentley was in, he was kind of like in that linebacker 2, linebacker 3 range. So it's never like going to be like, oh, all of a sudden Tavai is an LB1 now for me. No, nothing like that. Like you mentioned, I think Bentley suffered a pec injury. It was a tough weekend for pecs this weekend in the NFL, it seemed like. So clearly they need better trainers or something in the NFL. So yeah, no, I'm with you with Tavai. I have him as kind of like a middle LB3 this week. So
yeah, that's where I have him as well. Like on the low end of kind of the rest of the 100% snap players at the position. It's not like, an overly exciting matchup against the Jets or anything like that. And just nice, like if you're looking for a guy that you want, 100% snaps from at the linebacker position, he's going to be one that's out there quite a bit as well. So not really a whole lot else for New England. I mean, Kyle Duggar is safety 6 for me. I love Kyle Duggar. But let's look at the Jets because
I got one more for you. Go
for it.
I'm kind of looking like a cornerback streaming league. Is Jonathan Jones kind of getting since he's playing opposite Christian Gonzalez? Gonzalez is starting to enter that like elite tier of shutdown corner. We saw him this last weekend against DK Metcalf. He limited him to like 3 catches for 24 yards. And then whenever DK Metcalf traveled somewhere else on the field, he just exploded on the field. So, is Jonathan Jones kind of getting that like treatment like you see opposite of Sauce Gardner, opposite of Patrick Surtain, where he's starting to get a little more like, quarterbacks are starting to target his direction to avoid Christian Gonzalez? I don't know what are your thoughts on Gonzalez at all? So.
Yeah, no, I like Gonzalez a fair bit. I think last week the way it went, Gonzalez was targeted more, but the only thing that I have with like the Patriots corners that always makes me hesitant is that it seems that even without Belichick there is that they don't want to deploy these guys like at 100% snap roles, like at least not more than one of them, right? Like there might be one like Gonzalez that plays 100% of snaps, and then they kind of tinker a little bit with like a rotation at the position. Sometimes we saw that a lot last year and the year before where guys are playing 70-75%. It was never like full time, and I think Jones got him at 80% last week. But again, like it's a decent defense. Like it's one of the better coverage units in the league, right? Mm-hmm. So there's going to be times where they're going to have to, teams are going to try to pass on them, but if you got these good corners, you could break up passes and make tackles. I don't mind Jonathan Jones at all, but yeah, Gonzalez tends to be kind of my favorite there, but yeah, it's a good call on Jones.
I just didn't know if he was starting to enter that elite tier of, where the teams are starting to maybe to avoid him. Like obviously he's just in his second year and he had a rookie shortened season after his injury last year, but he just seems to be, being able to lock down these elite wide receivers week in and week out. So
yeah, solid player. New England always just seems to find these guys and have like a nice defense, and they did it again. Looks like this year, at least through 2 games. But then on the Jets side of things, we got an injury to Jermaine Johnson. He's done for the year. Achilles, unfortunately. So Will McDonald stepped up, had a 3-sack game. Any interest in like a Will McDonald, for example, to kind of keep the momentum going here against New England? Probably not 3 sacks again, but how you feeling about McDonald going forward?
I almost think on volume, he becomes a play. It's pretty tough to start him maybe in a league that only requires like 2 defensive linemen. Yeah. Maybe until we hit that bye week threshold, we start to see a few more Will McDonald showing up in starting lineups, but he's had a little bit of a run in the NFL and we just haven't seen it before. And so, maybe this puts a little fire under the Jets front office to finally get something done with Hassan Reddick, because if you're rolling out Will McDonald and Michael Clemens every week, I don't know if that really strikes fear in opposing quarterbacks, especially in the AFC East, when you're looking at, Rodgers and Josh Allen and whoever Miami decides to roll out. But yeah, I think he should be rostered in leagues. I just don't see him. I start him in a league more than that requires less than 2. So
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for this week. I think I have him as edge 35. Just might be more of that kind of boom bust type guy. So he's like in that edge 3 range. I just, the only thing, like, I think he has the pass rush upside. I guess I worry about him maybe being like an overly effective tackler on rundowns, right? So he might not have that production floor of some of the other guys that are playing or that I have ranked ahead of him. But yeah, not a bad player. Definitely some potential there. Could be rostered, like you said, but not necessarily a must start by any means just yet. One of the players that I think is still a must start is Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle there for the New York Jets. I have him as DT3 this week. I know, again, it's not like the most amazing matchup against the Patriots, although the pass blocking unit there hasn't been great so far this season, but Quinnen's just been fairly quiet. So already seeing people kind of starting to give up on Quinnen. How are you feeling about him? Are you, on the panicking side, or are you willing to kind of be patient here with Quinnen Williams?
I'm more than willing to be patient with him, especially, he has such a big body of work. We know what we're getting in him. This whole defense has just seemed to be getting off to a slow start for the Jets. They have 27 missed tackles as a team, and this unit was supposed to be a super amazing top tier defense, and they just look pretty sloppy. Offsides, false. They're just jumping and stuff like that. So, and I don't know if it's consistency. Again, we saw C.J. Mosley leave the field too with a toe injury, so they're rotating in players. So maybe that consistency piece is kind of leading to some of this. But I know that. Players are having drafted the Jets as a team defense. You're kind of disappointed in what you're getting right now. So
yeah, definitely hasn't lived up to what they were last year just yet. And you mentioned CJ Mosley was carted off with the toe injury. So he's questionable for Thursday night. It doesn't seem like he's going to play. It's a quick turnaround, right? So Jamie and Sherwood stepped in and played 100% of the snaps once Mosley was out of the game next to Quincy Williams. So Sherwood, another one of those guys for me, like kind of in that Jelani Tavai type range, where if you need a 100% snap player, it's early in the week, obviously, but Sherwood could be a solid option there.
I like him a lot this week, especially going against the Patriots, who are pretty run heavy. They're leaving heavily on Ramondre Stevenson. So, I could see this game being closer than what some of the experts might think, but I think it'll be a pretty run heavy game, keeping it close. So,
yep, it's a good call. Anything else for Thursday Night Football? Or should we move to the Sunday slate?
Let's go to Sunday.
Let's do it. All right, we'll start with the Chicago Bears at the Indianapolis Colts. We'll start with the Bears, and I guess Montez Sweat is a name that kind of stands out for me, who somebody that, speaking of slow starts, right, hasn't really done much, like had a nice matchup in week 1, just didn't do much with it. He draws a pretty tough matchup here against the Colts. They rank 2nd in pass blocking grade so far this season. They're our number 1 ranked offensive line as well. That being said, like, he still plays enough. He's got some pass rush potential there. There's just probably, I don't know, there's a number of ways that he can still be a starter for IDP. I'm just not like overly confident in him basically in this matchup specifically against the Colts, who have such a good offensive line, and Anthony Richardson, who can scramble and get out of the pocket pretty quickly. Like, he's kind of like the low end edge 2 for me this week. Might be even lower than that, honestly. How are you feeling about it? Because I guess I'm kind of on the fence on Montez Sweat.
I'm lower than most on Sweat. I wasn't a big fan of the trade to Chicago last season, just because he was legit the only piece there, and it's easy for a offensive coordinator to kind of like scheme away from him or to double team, get a chip on that edge, so they can really negate him in a game. So I've never really been a Sweat fan. So I'm kind of with you this week too, just a little bit lower than expected. And there really isn't anyone else along that defensive front line that really scares anyone. I know that Gervin Dexter has had a pretty decent couple of games. He has had back-to-back sacks in league. So if you're looking at the defensive tackle, maybe you lost to Forrest Buckner, which we'll get to probably in just a moment. But he might be an option in some deeper leagues and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's Gervin Dexter's not a bad option there. At least he started fine. He's like one of the top scoring defensive tackles already this season. But yeah, other than that, like, there's not a whole lot there on that Bears defensive line. Like, I know Darrell Taylor popped in week 1, but he's not like playing a ton either. DeMarcus Walker is playing a ton, but not really doing anything with those snaps. So yeah, you're right. It is basically just Montez Sweat there at this time. So I'm pretty sure, the Colts will be able to kind of scheme him as well. And maybe he gets lucky and breaks through with a sack, but I'm just not as confident in him right now. As far as the rest of the Bears go, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, we know about these guys. We're mostly starting them. Edwards for sure, Edmonds at times. But Kyler Gordon was somebody too that I wanted to touch on just quickly here. A cornerback here for the Chicago Bears, who, he's been a pretty good IDP in the past. He's obviously dealt with some health stuff and everything, like injuries as far as, staying on the field goes. But he's an interesting player to me, and potentially this week as well. Like, he's the kind of player that is playing the nickel right now for Chicago, likely to see his snaps kind of fluctuate a bit depending on the opponent. And we saw that kind of last week. He played 82% of the snaps in week 2 against the Texans, and the Texans were a team that ranked below average in 11 personnel rate, which does affect a nickel corner like that. And then this week, going up against the Indianapolis Colts, the Colts play a top 5 rate of 11 personnel, up over 80% of their offensive snaps. So provides probably a better chance for Gordon to stay on the field and be a productive IDP corner, more so than what we've seen through the first 2 weeks. So he's kind of like in that CB2 range for me, but I also do like Kyler Gordon.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on it too. I'm a big fan of the Bears defense, just because we have 5 players, actually almost 6, who have been on the field for every single snap. So it makes like getting those volume plays really, really good. Like we mentioned, TJ Edwards and Edmonds have been on the field every play. Yeah, Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard in the backfield, and then Jalen Johnson and even Tyreek Stevenson have been on the field almost every snap. I think one of them came off the field for one snap with a helmet issue or something silly like that. But so that makes setting your lineups 1,000% easier. If you have, IDP, it's all about volume. And if you have players that are on the field doing what they need to do, then, so I love the Bears for that reason. So
nice.
Outside of their defensive line. So
yeah, exactly. Once they get that sorted, I think they could be pretty good. Yeah. Like, they've been a good defense, I should say, so far, but yeah, need to get some pass rush there. I want to move to the Colts here and talk about Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, because this has been, I guess, one of the topics of the off season a little bit. People were excited about EJ Speed's finish to last year, kind of starting a little bit this year as well, but people are ready to get after Zaire Franklin with their pitchforks and torches because EJ Speed has been, the better IDP through 2 weeks here. I think it's going to be okay ultimately for both guys. I mean, EJ Speed, I think I have his LB9 this week. Zaire Franklin's like LB12. Like they're both in great spots to kind of be productive IDP linebackers going forward. We saw that last week. Both of them had, I think, around a 15% tackle efficiency. That's a couple points above average there. So it's also one of the more zone heavy defenses in the league in Indianapolis. So these guys are going to be in a good position to get tackles. Like Speed, like he's been the more effective IDP earlier in this season, but to me, at least, they're both kind of interchangeable as far as rankings go, and no reason to kind of overreact one way or the other after just 2 games. There's nothing like scheme wise that necessarily makes one better than the other. But do you have a preference for either of these guys, or how you feel on them?
I only have a preference for Speed because of the cost. You know, like getting Zaire, you're going to have to pay up to get him. And whereas Speed, you could, go a couple rounds later. And when you're talking about rankings too, I think of, not to identify like a specific number to them, but more of a tier. And I see these two like in that same tier of players. So like if I'm splitting hairs between Franklin or Speed in a week, they're both in that same pool. It's not like one is drastically better than the other. So I'm good rolling either of them out. Are you concerned at all about Franklin's numbers? Like, is he kind of in that Foye Oluokun, like not going to return a value? Like, because, Franklin was probably a top 5 linebacker.
Yeah, he definitely came with that price tag, right? This offseason. But yeah, I mean, for that reason, I'm not like overly excited about him necessarily paying back that top 5 price that he had this offseason, but I'm fine with him just overall, right? In general, right? Like as an IDP starter in your lineup, like I said, the zone heavy defense, the tackle efficiency was there. I think he forced a fumble last week as well. Like there's reasons to like Zaire Franklin still. It's just, it's always hard when you spend up on the linebacker position and they don't deliver right away. Patrick Queen, Zaire Franklin, Foye Oluokun potentially not having the 100% snaps, like those kind of things hurt, right? Where you can get full-time linebackers. We talk about it every offseason. We talk about it in season as well. Waiver wires, there's 100% snap guys. We got like 5 of them this week. And then you can get, the Blake Cashmans of the world late in drafts as well. And they perform for you, Kaiser White, whoever. So it's, again, another reason not to pay up too much for a pretty replaceable position, right? Where 100% snaps can also make these guys produce very similarly.
Is Zaire Franklin getting into that buy low territory?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, if people are down on him, like I don't mind to, take a swing. Like look at Foye Oluokun, right? So he's playing about 80% of the snaps, still producing well, still one of the top linebackers in scoring in IDP, but I don't expect that to kind of continue across an entire season if that snap share remains the same, right? So, if you can sell Foye Oluokun for, say, a Zaire Franklin plus, I would do that in a heartbeat, right? But it's always a little bit tricky just to kind of do those kind of trades. But I mean, there's definitely ways to acquire a Zaire Franklin for sure.
It's really interesting. We have so many uber efficient linebackers so far to start the season. Like we have a lot of linebackers performing well on the stat line. So when they look at the end of the box score, they look, they did really well. But then when you like kind of peel it back a little bit, you're like, Ivan Pace is a great example. It's like that guy has been uber efficient with the snaps that he's been playing. It's just like it's only a matter of time before that regression kind of catches up with him. And it's like you want to try to get out while the getting's good. So
yeah, it's a good shout. These things always tend to kind of even out across an entire season. So just things to keep in mind on, and that's why we like snaps more than anything else when we're looking at rest of the season stuff. Other than that, for the Colts, I mean, Nick Cross has been amazing to start. I know, he played in the Julian Blackmon box heavy role last week. If Julian Blackmon isn't able to go again this week, I'd definitely be looking to start Cross. If Blackmon is going to play, I'm probably not as excited about starting Nick Cross just because he's more likely going to play that deep safety role, but we saw him be productive for it in week 1. I just worry about that kind of being sustainable as well, because Gus Bradley's defense only plays one guy deep for so much of the snaps that, again, that's something that we can also see regress over an entire season. So like him if he's playing the Blackmon role, but if Blackmon's back in there, I probably am waiting another week to start Cross.
Yeah, I'm totally with you here. I got reports or saw reports today that Blackman was back at practice today, so it sounds like he'll be back. And just to your point too, in week 1 with Blackman in the lineup, they played 62 snaps. He had 62 snaps. Nick Cross had 62 snaps at free safety and 17 in the box with Blackman there. And then this last week in week 2, he had 60 of them in the box. So it was kind of like almost a total role reversal.
Right.
And so with Blackman coming back, like you said, but again, Cross has been pretty efficient. He's dragged up 26 combined tackles over the first 2 weeks. Isn't anything to shake your head at. But again, looking at the matchups, he played Houston with where they play 79 snaps in week 1. So, there's a lot of vertical passing and stuff like that. So he's going to get some opportunities downfield. And then last week playing the Packers, and the Packers ran 4 million times in that game because Malik Willis was throwing. So, just kind of look at that a little bit closer. So.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely things to kind of keep in mind here. Let's go to the Chargers and the Steelers now. Where do you want to start with one of these two teams?
Well, the layup here is the linebackers with the Chargers. They're just kind of having this outside of Henley, who's played 83 snaps so far. It's kind of this carousel of rotation between them. And if you have 3, you have none kind of going with. And so not that you wish an injury on anyone, but it would really give managers some clarity on who to play if they limit it down to 2, because, Henley's been playing well. Perryman's been playing well. Colson has been kind of limited with coming back from injury and stuff like that. But, if there were 2 of them, they would become fantasy relevant. But right now it's just kind of like a crapshoot. You don't know where you're going, or it makes it really, really tough. So.
Yeah, and then that's kind of what we saw a little bit last week, right? Colson left the game with a hamstring injury. I don't know if he's going to play or not this week. So that allowed basically Diane Henley to see the field a lot more. It even allowed Perriman to get a bump in snap share as well. It still wasn't ideal, but have to imagine if Colson doesn't play in this game, like you said, we see better snap shares for the 2 of them, Henley and Perriman. That is, and again, it is an ideal defense. As far as zone coverage goes, I think they're the most zone heavy team in the league. They're playing against one of the most run heavy offenses in the league as well. So there's a really nice matchup opportunity here for linebackers. But if there's going to be 3 of them, I'm not as interested. If Colson's out and you need a desperation play, then maybe I look to a Diane Henley or something like that because of the matchup, because of the usage. But for the most part, we're trying to avoid this group.
Yeah, and especially with no teams on buys yet, it makes it makes it even easier to pivot to some other position. So some other place. So
so many options there. Anybody else on the Chargers?
Have options.
Yeah, it is.
I'm kind of a fan of Elijah Molden. He had played 48 snaps last week. He had 6 combined tackles against a pretty anemic offense. And not that he's got a great matchup this week in Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh can't be any worse than what they just played. So I feel a little bit about that, especially if Aloha Gilman is out again this week. So, Molden is a guy they picked up for next to nothing right before the season started. Wasn't expected to do much, but here we are week 2, week 3, and he might be an option for you. So. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Alohi Gilman, if he's going to be active or not. But if not, Elijah Molden, not a bad, and I think he might be CB eligible on some platforms as well. So, in CB required leagues, Elijah Molden might still be designated a corner, which again, usually when you could get a safety in a corner designation, that's typically been a little bit of a cheat code. So do like to see that as well. Other than that, Derwin James, another one of those players that people are ready to get the pitchforks out after just 2 games. We talk about how kind of unstable defensive back production is all off season, and then as soon as the regular season starts, people completely forget that this is incredibly normal for the position. Derwin's going to have his big games as he does, and then on the flip side of that, those leading scorers at the position right now, they'll shit the bed soon as well. We don't need to panic. We see this every year. We just have to understand that that's kind of how the position works. If you find another option that you like more than Derwin or whoever has been disappointing you so far, then definitely go for it. But we're not going to write players off or anything like that just so early in the season. Still don't mind Derwin James. He's just more of a safety too for me this week. But anybody else for the Chargers for you?
You can't mention the Chargers and not think about Joey Bosa. He's had sacks in back-to-back games. He's graded out really well. Is it time to cash out on high side Joey Bosa before the injury, because it's really not a matter of when it's or if it's going to happen. It's when it's going to happen. We've seen him over his career, like especially in the last 4 seasons, cut short by injury. So he's stringing along a couple nice games. He's got his a couple sacks, and I might be selling high here.
I think that's definitely the play, right? I mean, we saw last week already, right? He was limited in the game with a back injury, 29% of snaps last week. So he got the sack, bailed us out for those who started him. But yeah, man, it's already starting up. It's week 2. Like, he hasn't missed a game yet, but 29% of snaps, if he's going to have those weeks where he's not playing full, like, it's just so frustrating because he's so good when he's on the field. He's like he's an actual weapon, but just can't stay healthy. So yeah, I'm with you. Sell high. Let's go to the Steelers here, and talk about, I guess, Patrick Queen, right? Because this is another guy that, again, people paid up for in the offseason, and he's been typically just an inefficient tackler. That's just kind of always what he's been. Like, he's been healthy and he's racked up, good final tackle totals, but you look at his snaps on the whole, and he's typically below average as far as efficiency goes. So it's not overly surprising that Queen hasn't been super productive yet. It's just, I guess, more surprising that he's been this inefficient, because this is like a new low for him. He's below like double-digit tackle efficiency. So where are you at with Patrick Queen, I guess? Are you still feeling fine starting him?
It's not just the production, it's the efficiency too. Like, he's looking like the autumn hillside in October. So his PFF grades are pretty rough looking, a lot of deep reds and stuff like that. So what is it with Pittsburgh and their Steelers? Like, or what is it with Pittsburgh and their linebackers? Like, they have not been productive for IDP purposes. You go back to 2021 with Cole Holcomb, he finished 8th. And before that, it was 2018 when Miles Jack finished 13th in scoring, before you have like those Pittsburgh, and they've had solid names. Shazier has been there, Holcomb was there for a run before he got hurt, but it just seems like a tough place to rack up stats for whatever reason for Steeler linebackers. So I was out before the season got started on Queen. He was on my sell list, but right now you just got to insert emoji face wherever you're thinking right now with him. So
yeah, he's more in that LB3 kind of range for me, like just outside the top 24, and that's where he was basically in my draft rankings this offseason as well. Like, it's not such a bad ranking that we don't expect him to have his good games, but we do have to kind of temper expectations for him as a whole. He'll still have his big games, but he's been a typically ineffective tackler, and that is something that tends to be sticky year to year. So just to keep that in mind for Patrick Queen, but 100% of snaps, we do like that part of it.
If you had Queen, would you trade for speed? Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, like, I mean, I like speed because he's been efficient. Like, he's at least shown that, where Queen he's had his games, right? But he hasn't shown it consistently. Speed at least is putting together a pretty nice stretch of being a pretty effective tackler. Like, he's not Alex Singleton necessarily, but it's still pretty good. So, I think, Patrick Queen, obviously right now is probably not the best time to sell him because he started off so slow, but if he, comes up with a big game, then that's where I'd probably try to move out on him if I can.
Yeah, I think his name carries a lot of weight yet. So I think maybe I would be very active in looking for a trade like that to like tier down to like a speed, from Queen. So
yep, absolutely. All right, let's go to Denver and Tampa Bay now, and start with Denver, I guess. Baron Browning, I just put in here, he got banged up. It's not like overly interesting for a lot of leagues, but Nick Bonito at least kind of becomes somewhat interesting in deeper leagues if Baron Browning can't go. Baker Mayfield. He obviously gave up a bunch of sacks last week but again, that was against Aiden Hutchinson. So it could still be a fine matchup for the pass rushing, but I just Nick Bonito, a name to kind of keep in mind for deeper leagues. Really, it's just Jonathan Cooper along that defensive line and Zach Allen. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty easy defense to look at and figure out who we're going to be using for IDP. Alex Singleton obviously is one. Cody Barton, I mentioned him last week because he was down around 36% of the snaps and was losing snaps to Christian Welch, who nobody's ever heard of. So I assumed he was dead, but he got up to 71% snaps last week. But so still alive in kind of those deeper formats, but he's not someone I'm trusting. I imagine those snaps will likely fluctuate a little bit. And then, other than that, Brandon Jones was kind of the other one. Like, he increased his snap share from week 1. He wasn't healthy this offseason, so looked like they were kind of easing him in. He went from 69% to 86%, but still not 100%, which puts a lot of safeties ahead of him in the ranks. So still kind of waiting on Brandon Jones. But, I mean, Denver's just not that interesting of an IDP group for me. How are you feeling? Anybody stand out to you?
One guy I'm trying to get ahead of everyone, Jonah Ellis, the rookie out of Utah. He got a sack last week. This team, I think, is going to be in evaluation mode sooner than later. And so with the offense being what it is and things like that, I think Jonah Ellis is going to get a little bit of run. Third round pick is pretty decent for a defensive end. And, he just plays like his hair's on fire. So I think he's going to be a player that I want to get out ahead on my league mates before he really does break out. So he's been a player I've been trying to scoop up where I can. Another player that's like sneaky if you have to play in a cornerback required league is Riley Moss. We kind of mentioned like earlier with the Christian Gonzalez playing opposite of like those shutdown corners. Patrick Surtain just signed for a big money. He's not going anywhere for a long time. And so, Riley Moss is kind of one of those players that might be like a sneaky play if you have to a cornerback required league, if you're kind of streaming that. He is second on the team with 15 tackles. So, you could do worse at the position, I think so.
Yeah, that's a good shout out. It's always good to, I think Johnny the Greek calls them the lesser of two evils, right? When you're looking at these outside corners here, and you might not want to target Patrick Surtain, so go to his opposite side there and look at a Riley Moss, and just draws some more action in his direction. So I like that call. Let's go to the Bucs here. Tampa Bay. Again, pretty easy defense for the most part. Like, there is just the one situation at linebacker now with Devin White gone. It's become a bit of a rotation where Servassier Dennis and KJ Britt are kind of splitting basically situations, right? So Servassier Dennis played 100% of the third and fourth down snaps last week. That he was only around like 75% of those snaps in week 1. So he fully took on that third and fourth down snap role. KJ Britt basically played only on the early downs. Dennis has been really efficient with those snaps. It's just not enough to be trusting him in lineups, right? 52% of his snaps of the snaps last week it's a dangerous game to play as far as bust potential, in putting guys like this in the lineup. But nice, like, kind of speculative ad. Maybe he increases his role. Bobby was on last week. He had talked about him potentially kind of growing his role as the season goes on. And he basically did last week. So maybe he gets more early down snaps as well. We'll have to see. But really, I think it's just Levante David for me still.
Yeah. And I'm going to publicly apologize to everyone who took my take on getting KJ Britt. I know that you were kind of felt like it was a trap, but the way I looked at it, like, Britt played amazingly well the last couple of games of last season. The last 2 or 3 games, he played like a ton of snaps. Servassier Dennis had 0 snaps. He played very inefficient to end last season. The coaches talked up KJ Britt this offseason. His teammates on defense talked him up. There was all the signs. It just felt like it was a huge breakout season for KJ Britt, and so far it hasn't materialized. So, is there time for it to still happen? Yes, but like, we're starting to look at in week 2, heading into week 3, and Servassier Dennis is starting to trend in the right direction, and KJ Britt is obviously going to have to take the loss on that one. So I apologize to everyone. My bad.
No. I get it. Like, I think I talked up Britt as well, right? Just because, like you said, the coaching staff was talking him up, and all signs were kind of pointing to him being an every down player. Todd Bowles had said, like, this is a guy capable of playing all 3 downs, right? So, we could kind of take that for what it is, but it just turns out to be a lie. So, like you said, it's not over yet. He's still getting a decent, playing time, but it's not what we're looking for necessarily for that full kind of breakout, I guess. So, we'll just keep an eye on the situation, but not really starting either one of those guys for now.
Right.
And then we'll see what happens with Antoine Winfield as well. He didn't play last week. I don't think he's going to play this week. And then Christian Izien was the guy that played in his place, in Winfield's place at safety. Izien also another one of those guys that has a cornerback designation as well. So somebody that you might want to take a look at in CB required leagues if he's available, because he'll be playing in Antoine Winfield's spot. When Winfield was out too, Jordan Whitehead played 47% of his snaps in the box last week. So that was really nice to see. And probably the guy that I like the most there out of that defensive backfield.
100%. Yeah. It just seems like a very key position on that defense. So whoever's in that spot is going to definitely get the production. I'm curious to see how this week the Bucs respond without Vita Vea playing. He suffered that MCL sprain, so he's going to be out. And I know that he was not only plugging up the middle, but he was taking on some double teams, making it a lot easier for Yaya Diaby and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka on the outside to get some pressures. They were both up to 12 pressures this season, so no sacks yet for either of them. But eventually those will come if they're getting the pressures. You'll eventually trip into a sack here and there. But I think that Vita Vea being out is going to kind of be a bigger hit to this defense. Thankfully, they're taking on the Broncos where it might not lead to a loss, but just something to kind of monitor if you're looking at that kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go to the Texans and the Vikings now. Anywhere you want to start with one of these two teams?
Well, kind of start with the linebackers here for me, with Henry To'oTo'o leading the team with 22 combined tackles already. Alshire seems to be playing a lot in the box and blitzing a lot. We saw that like late in the game. He was like basically being a stand-up lineman right over the center. When he's not on the sidelines in a boxing match and stuff like that, he's trying to get to the quarterback there. But To'oTo'o has stepped up really, really well for Christian Harris since he's been out. So I don't know that he's going to give up the job once Harris is healthy and comes back. He's been playing extremely well. So he just seems to be one of those, like you said, high volume linebackers that's on the field a ton, racking up tackles. And that defense is it's fun to watch. I mean, guys are flying around, pressure's being created. That secondary is having so much fun with, all the pressure that Anderson and Hunter are putting on the quarterback. So
yeah, it's a really good defense there. And yeah, To'oTo'o, I mean, yeah, really big week. Obviously only played 73% of the snaps, interestingly, in week 2, coming off mostly on passing down. So I think like for Minnesota, like or facing Minnesota, if Justin Jefferson, assuming he's good to go, which sounds like he might be, if Jordan Addison's back, like the Minnesota passing attack has looked pretty good so far with Sam Darnold. I could see them using more DBs again this week, which might make it slightly tougher for To'oTo'o to replicate kind of that strong like week 2 production that he had. He also got credited for a sack when Caleb Williams slid at the line of scrimmage, and he just happened to be near him, which is like as fluky of a big play as you get. It doesn't really do anything and gets credited for a pretty important amount of points there for IDP. So I don't mind To'oTo'o. I like him more for deeper leagues. I think just because he's not going to play that necessarily 100% snap role, it doesn't feel like. But I'm with you that Christian Harris might not necessarily be the starter that replaces him either when he's back. So he has played well.
Where do you have him ranked this week? Is he kind of like an LB 3-4 for you? Kind of in that range?
Yeah, he'd be in that range. Probably I think he's on the lower end of the LB3 range from what I remember, just because I typically sort them by snaps first, and then I kind of move guys around. And with him being more in that 75% snap range, he just naturally falls down the list. But he's probably more in that LB3, LB4 range. Let's go to the Vikings here. Anybody on the Vikings that you want to start with, Jeff?
It's hard not to talk about Pat Jones and how efficient he's been. I know that we've talked about a lot of players being super efficient. This Minnesota defense just seems to be very efficient overall. Ivan Pace has been super efficient with the limited snaps. He's not 100% nearly or even 80% snap guy, but he's just every week putting up stats. Pat Jones is another one. He's got 5 pressures and 4 sacks. There's no way that that's going to be sustainable. That's an 80% sack rate is, like unheard of. But then on the other side, you have Jonathan Grenard, who has 12 total pressures and only has 1 sack. So, sacks are such a fluky stat, like you just mentioned with To'oTo'o getting one as a 2-hand touch sack. Yeah. You kind of get that kind of thing. Whereas, Pat Jones is this uber efficient sack God, and then you have Grenard, who is doing a lot of heavy lifting but not getting any of that work for you. So, that's one of the things like I really like about like playing in a league where you get points for pressures and hurries and stuff like that, because those players are having a huge impact on the game, but they might not always show up in the stat column. So
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I talked about Pat Jones, I think, on the recap show. Like literally 49% of snaps in week 1 got 2 sacks, then 49% of snaps in week 2 got 2 sacks. It's just not sustainable. Like you said, it'll even out Greener. It'll end up surpassing him in snaps most likely across an entire season. Ivan Pace, same thing. Like he's been uber efficient, but 69% of the snaps last week was not terrible. It's just not ideal, right? He's not going to maintain that, whatever it was, 11 tackles or something like that again. And going against the Houston passing offense as well this week, I'd expect them to use more defensive backs on the field, Minnesota, that is. So that'll likely come at the cost of Ivan Pace's snaps as well. Other than that, the only other player that I think worth kind of mentioning is Harrison Smith, who's in a great spot, I think, to produce this week. He's been not only a full-time player, which we love, but he's been playing a strong snap share in the box, 45% of his snaps in the box in week 2. The Texans are the kind of team that provides like an ideal matchup for that type of usage specifically, as they're not only a strong passing offense that's going to complete a lot of the passes in the opposing secondary to allow for safety tackles, but they also run the ball at an above average rate as well, where those box safeties can rack up some tackles there as well. So the Texans have actually yielded the most tackles per game to the safety position. So for me, Harrison Smith, I have him in the top 5 this week. I really like his chances to have another nice strong tackle game.
Is Josh Metellus? Is this a Josh Metellus week?
Josh Metellus, also another one of those guys that I like quite a bit. Yeah, him and Harrison Smith, I'll flip flop in my rankings on any given week. But Metellus is awesome. He's everything we want in an IDP safety, because he plays so much in the box and basically not deep at all. Where Cameron Bynum's the guy that gets stuck deep, right? And that's why he hasn't been living up to his 2023 season either.
100%.
All right, let's go to the Packers and the Titans now. And we'll start with Green Bay, because Rashawn Gary has been pretty quiet so far. He did get a sack in week 1, but hasn't added like a whole lot else to his stats. I think he had a goose egg in the box score in week 2, like didn't do anything. However, he's been the clear leader in snap share for the Packers defensive line. And in both the weeks prior, he's had to face off against the 2 top highest graded offensive lines in the NFL. So the Philadelphia Eagles and the Indianapolis Colts, they're 1 and 2 in our offensive line rankings. They're 1 and 2 in our pass blocking grades. So this is kind of the nice matchup for Rashawn Gary to get, kind of a much needed favorable matchup against the Tennessee Titans. They ranked 26th in pass blocking grade through 2 games. And specifically right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere ranked 64th among 71 qualifying tackles in pass blocking grade this season with a 48.5. Will Levis also has taken 7 sacks. That's tied for the 5th most through 2 games, has a 21.9% pressure to sack conversion rate. For me, I still think there's plenty of reason to be kind of optimistic about Rashawn Gary for a strong IDP performance here in week 3.
Yeah, Kyle Bellafuel and I fully endorse your endorsement of Rashawn Gary for sure. Yeah, I'm totally on board with you on this one too. I think Gary, just like you said, he's a victim of really tough matchups to start the season. He was coming off an injury from last season. He looked fully healthy in the preseason. He looked, like a shredded tank, in the workout stuff like there. So good days are coming for him for sure. So, and Levis is a quarterback that we've seen through the first couple of weeks that he's kind of prone to some bonehead plays. So, let's make it a hat trick. Let's get 3 in a row. So.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Hopefully, Rashawn Gary on the receiving end of one of those boneheaded plays. But yeah, as a Packers fan, Jeff, I got to ask you, because there was talk heading into last week, I guess it was, about Edgerrin Cooper potentially eating into Isaiah McDuffie's workload. We didn't really see that happen. McDuffie still played around 90% of the snaps, where Edgerrin Cooper only played about 13% of the snaps. So, any kind of inside info there, I guess, for your Packers fandom that indicates when we're going to see more Edgerrin Cooper, you think?
And I think it'll be kind of game dependent too, because I feel McDuffie is a better run stopper right now. And Cooper was kind of like that, like twitchy outside, when he was at Texas A&M, he was that outside, like almost like off the ball outside linebacker where you would be used more for blitzing the quarterback and things like that. So I think they're going to kind of game script him into things. Last week was a very run heavy game. Eric Wilson actually got a little bit of run last week, too. So, and he came up with like the game clinching interception or play at the end of the game there. So it was just really weird right now. Quay Walker hasn't been super efficient, but he's played every snap. So it's just kind of, almost a room of pieces, and whatever the room needs right now, or whatever the game script kind of goes, that's where they're going to go. But I think Walker's probably the safest one here. And I think we're going to, McDuffie and Cooper are just going to kind of be annoying to each other for most of the season. And unfortunately to fantasy managers as well. So, they invested quite a bit in Cooper, so not to be using him, that's,
Yeah, you don't want to end up like the Lions and spend a high pick on a linebacker only to have him play 60% of the snaps. But yeah,
too soon.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm with you. Quay Walker, the safe bet. The rest of them for deeper. Well, McDuffie for deeper leagues, not so much Cooper yet. Anybody else on Green Bay? I'll leave it to you for your Packers here. Anybody that you want to talk about?
I've been a big fan of this Jeff Hafley defense, especially in the secondary. I love seeing Keyshawn Nixon almost playing exclusively in that slot position. We haven't gotten the luxury of him doing any return yardage yet, but he had kind of a tough matchup last week. I think this week will be a little bit better. Tennessee has definitely been throwing the ball around the yard a little bit more, so I think Nixon will probably be back in play. He had an amazing week 1 against Philly. They were definitely a pass-happy offense. Last week, a little meh from the Colts passing part, and I think this week will have a good bounce back. So I'm a big fan of Keyshawn Nixon. I also love the safeties, how interchangeable Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney have been. They complement each other really well. They don't play exclusive in one position. They can kind of be up and down and things like that. So they're really nice chess pieces on that defense. Bullard has played last week. He had 13 snaps in the box of his 42. McKinney played 10 of his 56 in the box. McKinney's had 2 picks in the last 2 weeks. They're both highly efficient in tackling. So if I have any piece of that defense between Nixon and cornerback required leagues, or either the safeties, where in a league where I want to start 2 safeties or more, Bullard and McKinney are definitely probably on that radar for me. So
nice. Yeah, I like that. Bullard, interesting. Why did he only play 75% of the snaps last week? I guess was my kind of question. I didn't see anything like injury related. He played 100% in week 1. I don't know if that was just a weird kind of blip on the radar, but that was something that I made note of just to kind of keep an eye on, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on injury reports or anything like that. And they practiced today, so I full steam ahead with them, I guess. So
okay. All right. And then on the Tennessee Titans side of things, the main thing for me, Ernest Jones is back in as a full-time NFL linebacker, which means he's back in as a locked-in IDP starter kind of going forward, right? Like, it was a really short wait for Jones to emerge as a starter with his new team. He played 100% of the snaps in week 2, got right back to his above-average tackling ways, coming away with a 15.8% tackle rate on the day, which is really nice. So, he's got the Packers this week. The Packers have actually so far allowed the highest average amount of tackles per game to the linebacker position through the first 2 games, or at least tied for it. I can't remember if it was a tie or not, but it's just like it's a small sample size again, but just to kind of boost that top 12 potential for Ernest Jones. I'm feeling pretty good about him again.
Yeah, I feel really good about Ernest Jones and Kenneth Murray both this week, especially if Jordan Love is out. If Love is out and Malik Willis is back, we could see another 50 runs for the Packers on the offenses. They had 50 snaps last week just running the ball. So, that just oozes volume and oozes opportunity for linebackers. So, pay really close attention to the offensive side of the ball in Green Bay to see if Willis gets a start. And if they do, Ernest Jones is locked and loaded, I think, as a LB1 this week. And Kenneth Murray, I don't think, is too far behind. So,
yeah, I'm with you. Jeffrey Simmons in the middle of that defensive line as well. I think that's a nice spot for him. If him as a top 5 play this week at the position. Harold Landry has been just a solid volume edge rusher, like never has amazing pass rush metrics, but always just seems to find a way to get sacks and get home. And that's just because he's on the field so much. So he's another one of those guys that mostly stays locked into lineups as well.
Yeah, the one thing with him is he's only kind of playing 50% of snaps, which is a little worrisome because that seems very boomer bust with things. But that's the nature of the position too. So,
yep, absolutely. All right, let's go to what's the next game here? What do I got? Oh, yeah,
Giants and Cleveland.
Yeah, Giants and Cleveland. Let's go to the Giants and Cleveland. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
For me, it's going to be the linebacker, Micah McFadden. Nice. McFadden sat out for week 1, with an injury. He was kind of dinged up in the preseason. Came back last week, taking over for Darius Marshaw. So McFadden played 57 snaps. He had 12 combined tackles and a sack. So, very similar to, Indianapolis, very similar to Jacksonville. I almost kind of want to have that second piece of the linebacker room. Let somebody else pay up for the premium name, whether it's a Lucan or Okereke or Franklin. And then I'll take the McFaddens. I'll take the Devin Lloyds. I'll take the EJ Speeds, because they're putting up as good of numbers, if not better, than their more highly ranked counterparts. So,
yeah, it was nice to see, like, for McFadden, like he was like more of a sub 70% player under Wink Martindale last year. Was it Wink in 2023? Anyways, wherever was their defensive coordinator, I'm already forgetting. But yeah, then came back last week and was up around that 80% snap range, which is definitely better for his IDP value. Still, I think still more like kind of the deeper league type player for me. But I mean, he was insanely productive with his limited snaps as well, 12 tackles or something like that. So Bobby Okereke also nice bounce back last week as well, which we kind of expected. So starting Bobby O, McFadden for the deeper leagues. How about anybody for the defensive backs for you, like Tyler Nubin, Jason Pinnock? Any preference for those safeties?
I'm kind of partial to Pinnock. I had him as like on the waiver wire articles, and I wrote those last year about a pickup. He had a great season, and almost out of necessity, he was there. He had a really down week 1, but had an amazing week 2. He had seven combined tackles. He had 2 sacks. He's a leader on the team in sacks when you're looking at, it's kind of funny because they have all this invested in, Brian Burns and Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence and stuff like that. And then they are not getting the sacks, but here we have a safety that was available in like 100% of the leagues. And then, he's getting all this play. So Nubin looks like he's definitely NFL ready. He's not really in the big splash play department, nothing with the sacks and turnovers and things like that. Just kind of a steady Eddie getting the tackles and things like that. So, he's probably a player I want to maybe have a few shares on, just as kind of going forward as a dynasty stash. But, as we get to these bye weeks, Pinnock might see his name pop up again as a kind of a viable option for some teams. So especially if you play like he did last week. So.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, 2 sacks, and I think he only had like 2 pass rush attempts as well. So again, just uber efficient. Has been more the deep safety of the two. Tyler Nubin surprisingly has played over 50% of the snaps in the box. So like his kind of potential going forward. Even if it's not this week against the Browns necessarily, but they have been a poor matchup so far for safeties. Actually, they're ranked last as far as safety tackles per game go. The other player that I think is really interesting for the Giants is Drew Phillips, their cornerback there, their nickel corner, had ideal IDP deployment, in week 2, which I think immediately you should put him on IDP radars heading into week 3. There's, maybe I have at least some hesitancy in fully embracing him, as he wasn't like a starter in week 1 and then had to kind of get into that role in week 2. So we'll see, after a couple of weeks, how locked in that role is. But odds are that he's probably going to keep it heading into week 3 because he played really well. And the Browns are also among the league leaders in 11 personnel rate, which is another one of those things that's going to help a nickel corner like Andrew Phillips stay on the field. So could be in a nice spot to put up strong tackle numbers again. He was awesome last week.
We need Jameis Winston under center though to make fully unlock him. So 30 for 30, baby. 30 for 30.
God, that's might not be too far from it, but we'll see what happens. And then, other than that, Giants edge rushers, Brian Burns, I still have like in that edge 2 range. Thibodeau, I'm not messing around with until he shows us something. And then Dexter Lawrence, still a solid defensive tackle option. And then on the Brown side, not a whole ton here. Obviously, we know we're starting Myles Garrett. JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, that is, played all but one snap this past week. So basically 2 weeks in a row of full-time roles. So we've seen the Browns play tricks on us before, take the rug out from under us kind of thing with these linebackers. So how confident are you, I guess, in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah kind of staying in this basically full-time role?
Yeah, I think he almost has to. The Browns have been one of those teams that have just been really hit by injuries. They have 26 different players that have played a defensive snap for them, and we're only in week 2. You know, we talked about kind of the opposite side of the coin earlier when we were mentioning like the Giants or whoever had only 13 players playing, you know, so it's just that consistency and stuff like that. Whereas the Browns are just been, 26 different players, and we're in week 2 right now. And that's, Jordan Hicks hasn't been playing a full-time complement of snaps there. They brought in Kaliki Hudson from, off the practice squad from the Saints. He played a couple of snaps. So there's just like this constant turnover. We saw Juan Thornhill leave for IR and stuff like that. So yeah, anytime I can get a player that's going to be playing 100% of snaps, you sign me up any day. So
yeah, I like that. I also like Grant Delpit as well, safety there. I know it's been a quiet start for him, but love the usage. 45% in the box last week, 27% in the slot. Like, this is what we want out of our IDP safeties. The Giants haven't necessarily been a great matchup for safeties so far, but I still like Delpit's IDP potential. So willing to be patient on him for this season. All right, let's go to Philadelphia, New Orleans now. And I guess I want to start with Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles, who, one of the players that I had as kind of a breakout candidate heading into this year. It's been a slow start for sure, but, one of the things that I thought would really help Jalen Carter's breakout potential this year was an increase in kind of overall snaps, specifically on rundowns. And we're kind of seeing that here in 2024. He's averaging around 75% of the team's run defensive snaps, when that number was around only 45% in 2023. So a pretty big increase there. The pass rush metrics are still strong as well. So I'm feeling optimistic still about Jalen Carter, despite the slow start. It's not like an amazing matchup this week for pass rush upside, though Derek Carr has taken some sacks. They just haven't been passing a ton. This should be hopefully a closer game with more passing opportunities. So potentially more opportunities for Carter to get a sack, but even still, like, the Saints run game has allowed basically the 5th highest tackles per game to opposing defensive linemen as well so far this year, which, for Carter, who's playing on those early downs more this season, I think that really helps him in that regard. So I have him as DT 11 this week. I guess maybe I'm feeling more optimistic than probably some, but I like the talent. I like the potential. Everything, snap share, all of that kind of stuff is still pointing in the right direction for Jalen Carter.
Yeah, anytime I think you can merge not only opportunity plays that he's been getting, he's been playing a ton of snaps, so the volume is there. But then you look at the over under for this game, it's the second highest point total on the slate, which means a lot of opportunities. So you combine those two things, you've got a player who's playing a ton of snaps with a game that's going to have a lot of snaps for both teams, I think, and you just create a lot of opportunities. So I'm totally with you with Jalen Carter finally having that breakout. This defense is kind of disappointing, kind of like we were talking about with the Jets. This is a team that was supposed to be the defense this year, and they have 3 team sacks. 2 of them were Zach Bond in week 1. So it's kind of like that. Where is this elite defensive line that we had just a couple seasons ago that was setting the world on fire and setting NFL records? Apparently the Georgia Bulldogs aren't made for the NFL. So, is that a sign of the players? Is that on Vic Fangio? Kind of where is that at? So it's not only the defensive line that's kind of stinking it up, but that secondary, for all the talent that they have there, they have 14 missed tackles in the first 2 weeks too. So you're looking, obviously that huge one that CJ Gardner-Johnson led up in last weekend's game, but these are elite players: Blankenship, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, and Keon Mitchell. 14 missed tackles. That's a lot for a defense that's supposed to be one of the elites in the NFL. So, are they going to figure it out? I don't know. They got Devin White issues they figure out. They've got a lot of things going on in this team. So
Yeah, yeah. I think they don't want to add to that missed tackle issue by putting Devin White on the field, which is why he's a healthy scratch. But yeah, I'm with you. It's been definitely disappointing so far. I think there's definitely more potential to kind of unlock there with a lot of these players on that Eagles defense, and Bryce Hoff potentially being one of them. Like, he's another guy I'm just staying away from for now for IDP until we start to see some consistency there. Brandon Graham, we're not really trusting. Josh Sweat, I'm fine with kind of in that low end edge 2, high end edge 3 type range, because I think he'll get there. But other than that, I mean, yeah, Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean show. That's basically where we're going with the linebackers. Obviously, Reed Blankenship, CJ Gardner-Johnson, we like those guys as well. But Devin White, I don't think he's coming back. It doesn't feel like it anyways. Like, you don't get healthy scratched for Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, who don't have a lot of NFL experience at linebackers. So right. Not looking good.
No, and Nakobe Dean hasn't like played well either. Like, he's like very inefficient when he's out on the field. Like, he's making a lot of guys some pretty good posters. So
Yep. It's an interesting situation there at linebacker. But we'll see how it evolves kind of as the season goes. And then on the Saints side of things, I mean, the most exciting player has to be Alontae Taylor at this point. He's been amazing to start the year. He's basically DB1, I think, in a lot of leagues. Eagles are only around average in 11 personnel, which could keep him from playing full-time snaps. Like, he isn't a player that's locked into 100% snap role. So we do see him come off the field a lot, but usage when he's on the field is pretty strong, stays in the slot, plays in the box, gets some pass rush attempts. Like, I think he's just really hard to bench at this point for IDP. I think he just stays in your lineup until he gives you reason not to.
Yeah, he's doing all the things. Like, he's getting in the tackle, so you got a high safe floor with him with the tackle floor, but then he's also have that huge splash play upside, pass breakups, slacks. Like, yeah, he's definitely worthy of a start for sure.
Yeah. And anybody else on New Orleans?
Yeah, the other piece for the Saints, I kind of a big fan of their defensive line lately. Granderson has 2 sacks. We got Brian Breesy has a sack. Even Chase Young has a sack now. And even with the blowout win last week in Dallas, they didn't play a full complement of snaps, but they're still putting up decent sack totals. And so, this is kind of one of those like almost perfect storms, where the secondary is playing well, the front end of the defense is playing well. Like, they're just kind of clicking at the right time. So, Granderson has off to a great start this season. So he's probably, that middle of the road DL2 for me heading into this week. So
yeah, he's a solid play. I'm with you. Not much else to add there for the Saints. Just been a good defense so far. So before we get into the later games, I do want to give a quick shout out to another ad here. LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFFfantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFFfantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's go to the 4:00 games here. Miami at Seattle is next up. Who do you like to start in Miami and Seattle, Jeff?
Yeah, this game got a whole lot less appealing, with Tua going down. I think, it's going to take at least a week or two for that offense to kind of figure out where they're at. I was kind of disappointed in the Dolphins front 4 last week. Jelani Phillips and Zach Seiler each had meh weeks in week 2. I was kind of banking a lot on them. After a strong start, I was really optimistic, especially with Phillips coming back from the Achilles injury. I was like, oh, here we go. This is wheels up. Here we go. This is going to be awesome. And then kind of a disappointing week 2, in a matchup that I thought was a pretty decent one for them. So I'm hoping for a bounce back. They're definitely going to need them now without Tua there. I think they're definitely going to need a spark, and I think it's going to have to come from the defense. The secondary isn't showing up either for the Dolphins. So yeah, it's going to have to be somewhere. Thank goodness for the linebackers there for us. But
Yeah, linebackers have been awesome. Both guys playing 100% of snaps, which we love, David Long and Jordan Brooks. So they're good to go in basically most league types. It's not Seattle didn't show as a great matchup that they've allowed the fewest tackles per game to the linebacker position. Again, very small sample. But yeah, then just coming back quickly to Jalen Phillips before we move to Seattle. Like for me, like I think we just got to be patient with him. Like coming off that Achilles, it just has, I think, consequences, right? As far as, sapping his speed, his burst, and everything that he can bring to the table. Just a 49.3 pass rush grade in week 2. He played behind Chop Robinson, as well as Emmanuel Ogbah, who led the group in snaps. So it's not like the worst matchup this week if you have to play him. Seattle owns the second worst pass blocking grade on the year so far. He's just, for me at least, not the must start that he used to be before the Achilles injury. So I'm still kind of keeping Jalen outside of that top 36 range for now, at least.
Yep, I'm with you.
And then on the Seattle side, who do you like in Seattle?
Boye Mafe has been playing extremely well. He has sacks in back-to-back games. He was kind of dinged up in the last one. I see that he was sitting out of practice today, but he has 9 pressures and 6 pressures in the last 2 games. So he's, stepping up with Uchenna Nwosu being gone. So he makes for a great option there. And it's hard not to talk about our favorite Tyrese Knight, getting an opportunity, a little run this last week. Played in over 40 snaps. Baker has a hamstring injury. I know he got a limited practice in today, but I don't think he has to play or practice all week, Baker. I mean, to suit up and, having that late 3:00 start is kind of tough because, unless you have them handcuffed, I wouldn't want to have Tyrese Knight in my lineup without knowing that Baker is or isn't playing. So maybe we'll get some clarity before Sunday, but yeah, it's nice to see him out on the field and kind of a glimpse of what's to come.
Yeah, Tyrese Knight could be, a nice, interesting play. He was another one of those guys that played full-time snaps when Baker left the game. So if Jerome Baker's out again this week, then yeah, he might be one of those plays. But like you said, the window gets smaller there if we don't get clarity right before game time. And then, yeah, just quickly on Boye Mafe too. Like I love Boye Mafe for right now for this season and for this week as well. I think I have him as edge 13. Miami's pass blocking unit ranks 30th right now. We got Skylar Thompson at quarterback. So no idea how good the offense will be for kind of the rest of the Seattle IDPs to produce, but I don't mind it at all for the pass rushers. Boye Mafe specifically, who gets Austin Jackson this week. He's been the worst of the Miami offensive linemen with a 38.7 pass blocking grade on the year. That ranks 65th among 68 qualifiers. Meanwhile, Mafe has just been excellent. He's got a top 12 pass rush grade on the year as well. So feeling pretty good about him.
Yeah, it'll be excited when Nwosu finally comes back, and then they can both be teaming off on him because that'll be a kind of fun to see with them and Leonard Williams there in the middle. So,
yeah, there's definitely some potential there, and yeah, Byron Murphy as well. If he gets going too, right? Like it could be a nice defensive line there in Seattle. All right, let's go to Carolina and Las Vegas now. Carolina, I don't know, really, really uninteresting.
Andy Dalton starting. I guess.
There's that, right? Yeah, I could get into a whole thing about Bryce Young, but it's been covered to death at this point. So we'll talk about the defensive side. And yeah, I mean, I do like kind of like the low key IDP potential of Shaq Thompson and Jose Jewell, right? You're talking about, some of those guys that you can buy low on that are in 100% snap roles and are going to be productive. Like I think both of these guys have that potential. It's a top 10 defense as far as zone coverage rate goes. So I think both of these guys are capable IDP starters if you have to put them into lineups. A'Shawn Robinson, also kind of great for DT required leagues. He's been really productive in the absence of Derek Brown. So other than that, those are kind of the guys for Carolina for me. How are you feeling about their IDPs?
Those are all of the pieces and parts. I'm just curious, how long before we get to see Trevin Wallace? Is there a world where, one of these teams that's been hit really hard with the injury bug, they're making a playoff push? Maybe it's like a Philly who's not really happy with Nakobe Dean. Maybe it's Buffalo who's been decimated by linebacker injuries. Do they make a play for like, hey, well, a Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell for a playoff run? And then do we get to see a Trevin Wallace kind of a, week 15 breakout for the rest of the season, at least to see what Carolina has in them? Because clearly this team is in evaluation mode. They need to figure out where they are and what they're going with in the future. So, he's a rookie that a lot of us are pretty high on. So.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout, right? Because I think that's kind of the path, though. Like it's either injury or like Shaq Thompson or Josie Jewell or somebody getting traded out of there that gets him into a playing time this season. Because I don't think he's necessarily going to win the job as a rookie or cut into the playing time by any means. So that would probably be the way to do it. But yeah, still somebody kind of interest, at least for those dynasty leagues. And then
is there a defensive coordinator, because he was formerly Jewel's defensive coordinator in Denver, right? So there's probably a strong connection there. So that's not going anywhere. So
Evero, and I think he got a 2 or 3 year deal this offseason. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did give him a bit of a contract there. So feeling pretty good about both of those linebackers going forward. And then on the other side, I mean, it's another defense that I'm not overly excited about, right? There's one player specifically, Max Crosby, obviously for the Las Vegas Raiders, who, how could you not love Max Crosby? 100% of snaps for him in 5 straight games now, dating back to last year. The Panthers O-line has actually been really good this year in pass blocking. Andy Dalton is going to 100% be better than what Bryce Young has given us so far this year, as crazy as that is to say. But I figure that leads to the offense at least being more effective, which should help the IDP potential of the Raiders defense. But it's really only a few guys that we care about. It's Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and Robert Spillane. So anybody else on that defense that is interesting to you?
Not really. Even Hobbs has kind of been a concern. Right. He hasn't seen, he had a great matchup last week and he showed up with 1 tackle. This week obviously is not the matchup to be starting Hobbs, and he's perennial been a locked in, right near the top if you're a cornerback required league, and even leagues that he's a cornerback, he's a borderline starter at the safety position. So just kind of not seeing the return with Hobbs yet, and I'm just kind of disappointed because he's always been an exciting player and one of those I don't want to say a set it and forget it type player, but he's kind of been that way, and I'm just excited for this team to get Malcolm Kuntz back. It's going to be so that front line is just going to be awesome with, obviously Crosby on one side, Wilkinson's playing fantastic in the middle, and we saw glimpses last season at the end of the season with Kuntz. So I'm just when he got hurt in the preseason, I was got to temper expectations for a little bit here. So.
Yeah, that sucked that he got on IR, but yeah, once he's back, I think that gives us at least another IDP to be interested in there. And then I'm with you on Hobbs. I've definitely been disappointed with his production, especially considering what he's shown us in the past. So hopefully he kind of bounces back as well. But for now, he's not a must start or anything. There's so many cornerbacks out there that we can pivot to in the meantime.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, let's go to Detroit and Arizona. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Well, I'll take the linebackers. You can take Hutch. So, we saw Anzalone kind of get dinged up, and then is this finally the chance that all of these Jack Campbell people, is this the chance he finally gets to be it? I have a sneaky feeling it's probably going to be Derek Barnes. It's probably going to be the gross play that's going to, pull the wool over eyes once more. And the nice thing about Barnes, he's DL eligible in a lot of leagues. Right. And so if he's getting any uptick in linebacker snaps, he's going to be sneaky cheat code as long as Anzalone's out. And I haven't seen or heard any updates on Anzalone, but Derek Barnes is going to be, one of those players that if you're playing, prop bets or something like that, hey, check out the Derek Barnes line. He might get, if he just sees 10 more snaps at linebacker, that could be an extra tackle or 2 every week. So that could put him over a line. So I'll leave that for another show, but Derek Barnes is maybe a player that's going to maybe see a little more sneaky play with Anzalone if he misses the time. As much as I would love to see Jack Campbell finally be the Jack Campbell we all drafted him to be, I have my reservations at this point. So.
Yeah, and I think that's fair for sure to kind of how to view this group, because that is kind of what they showed us last week a little bit, right? Where Anzalone got the concussion and was out of the game. Barnes, the one thing, like you said, if you're playing him in leagues where he has the DL eligibility, that's where I probably am most interested in playing him, but not necessarily in a linebacker slot, right? Just because he did play mostly on the edge last week, and that's kind of been his role in that defense where he's playing on the edge, he's blitzing a lot. So for IDP purposes, not an automatic pickup where his raw snap share might suggest that he's this locked in full-time linebacker. But I think for his role in that defense probably causes his tackle efficiency to be a little bit lower than I would expect. But if Anzalone is out like that, I think, I don't know, I feel like a little bit more optimistic about Jack Campbell, at least, like as kind of, you know, in I know it's a constant.
How many shares of him do you have? Full disclosure.
Surprisingly, I don't think I have even one. I think I did get him late in a redraft. And then I immediately dropped him when I saw the usage from week 1. So I replaced him right away. But dynasty wise, I just wasn't able to get him. But I do like the player quite a bit. And I think he might be kind of, you know, a sneaky play if Anzalone is out. I think, you know, as far as just playing off-ball linebacker to get the tackles, I like him a little bit more, even though Derek Barnes might play a few more snaps. I think where they're playing is what gives me the hope that Campbell might have a good game if we need to play him. But other than that, Aiden Hutchinson just has been elite, as we expected, right? Coming into it, the numbers this season are absolutely insane. He's picking up right where he left off last year, just delivering on the sacks now, which we love, right? And which we kind of expected this offseason as well. He led all players in expected sacks in 2023, which, you know, anyone that listened to the show this offseason or read my content at PFF will know that expected sacks basically was a metric that I created that we was able to prove that to be the most stable and predictive metric for future sacks. And with Hutch leading the way in that regard, like he was just a great bet to be an elite IDP again this season. I think I had him as my overall IDP 3 heading into the year, behind only Max Crosby and TJ Watt. And anyway, this is just a chance for me to give glowing praise to Aiden Hutchinson because I love Hutch, and there's no way he's leaving our starting lineups at this point. Now that I've jinxed him and he's probably going to get a goose egg this week, that'll balance out the rest of the season.
Yep.
How about on the Arizona Cardinals side?
Progression, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
For the Cardinals, Dennis Gardeck was just a monster last week. You know, we talked about Hutchinson having a blow up game. You know, Gardeck had a blow-up game. He played 40 snaps in week 1. He ended the week with 1 assisted tackle. So, But in week 2, he only played 26 snaps, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss. You know, and so the only thing that Gardeck could do better is talk to the people at Sleeper and get him defensive line eligible, because right now he's only listed as a linebacker, and the dude plays every single snap on the defensive line. I don't know how many more times I can submit a form saying, take a look at this. But so I'm hopeful that Gardeck eventually gets changed his eligibility on Sleeper. But if he's available in those leagues, you got to go pick him up now, because hopefully by week 7 or 8 they take a look at that stuff, and he's going to be a cheat code, because they need him on that defensive line. You know, they've suffered so many injuries. You know, Darius Robinson hopefully will come back week 4, week 5, the rookie out of Missouri. So I'm expecting him to kind of be one of those plug and play kind of players as well. But, you know, Gardeck has just been one of those fun players to watch. You know, he's got the long hair, he's got everything going for him. What else could he need? So
he's got the nickname, the Barbarian, right? Like he's he was awesome last week. 92.0 pass rush grade on the 3 sacks. So Sleeper's got to figure that out. I don't know what they're doing there with some of these designations, but how they don't have him as a defensive lineman eligible, I don't understand. Other than that, Arizona, I mean, Kaiser White is a perfectly good start as well. 100% snap roll in that defense. Mac Wilson more for deeper leagues. Buda Baker we're starting. Jalen Thompson we're likely starting in a lot of safety leagues as well. So I think that does it for Arizona. So
the only thing with Arizona with the linebackers last week, you know, they got that blowout win. You know, they're very unexpected blowout win. So then we got to see Owen Popo and Chris Barnes in there, probably a little more. You know, I know Wilson was kind of a streaming option for a lot of things. I think some managers got burned by that, but it was more game flow than it was actual. You know, if it would have been a typical week, we probably didn't see Arizona putting up what they did, and Wilson was in there, probably would have got a little more run. You know, Popo and Barnes got more run than they probably should have. But again, that's the unpredictability of the game that we play. So,
yeah, it could happen to any team on any given week, and against any team too. I mean, New Orleans blew out Dallas last week, right? So, I don't know that Arizona's going to blow out Detroit, so it should be a safer play for the rest of the IDPs there.
You jinxed that one too now. Thanks a lot.
Oh, God. Yeah. Darn it. Going to do that a lot. Let's look at San Francisco versus the Los Angeles Rams here. And let's start with, I mean, the matchup specifically in the trenches here in favor of the San Francisco 49ers defensive line against the Rams offensive line. I mean, the Rams offensive line has been shockingly bad so far this season. They have a team pass blocking grade right now of 29.2, which is by far the worst in the league. The next closest is Seattle, and they have a 53.3. So now they have to face Nick Bosa and the 49ers without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for the passing game as well. Like I think Nick Bosa eats this week. Could be a Leonard Floyd week as well. Javon Hargrave, go get them out there because the Rams pass blocking has been atrocious. Other than that, 49ers pretty easy defense to kind of dissect here. Fred Warner is LB1. Devondre Campbell can be a fine play. He just hasn't been very efficient, but playing a full-time role. Talanoa Hufanga might be back this week. I think he's back practicing, so that was a good sign. But anybody else for the 49ers for you?
No, you kind of nailed it with all those calls. And, I think this is the get-right game that the 49ers needed because they haven't looked like the 49ers should have looked this season. They're, probably one of the favorites to win the NFC this season, and they just haven't looked, like kind of laying a clunker against the Vikings last week, and they just didn't look like what they should. And I think this is that get right game. And every season, every team has one of those games that okay, this is the game we get right. And if they don't get right against the Rams this weekend, like I think there's some bigger issues for the 49ers because, like you said, the Rams have no one left. They're like decimated across both sides of the ball. So, I think the defense gets to eat. I think the offense is kind of struggling too with CMC out, and Debo will be out this week, but this might be a Ayuk and Kittle week. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think the 49ers kind of get right here as well. The Rams are just too banged up at this point. So, and then on that Rams defense, I mean, I like Jared Verse. I think Jared Verse has been excellent here to start the season. The only thing is that he has to face Trent Williams in this matchup, which is not ideal. Verse is lined up exclusively against opposing left tackles so far this season. Trent Williams, arguably the best tackle in the league. So I like Verse for volume and tackle potential more than anything here this week. He's probably in the low end, kind of edge 2 or to edge 3 range, but really good player. I just think this is probably going to be a tougher matchup for him. And then as far as the rest of the Rams go, Troy Reader, I think is a solid play. He just continues to be as long as the Rams are willing to roll him out there in a full-time role. I think we can start Troy Reader. I think he's going to see a lot of Jordan Mason this week as well to kind of keep him busy. So I think it makes sense that he stays in starting lineups where you've been starting him. And how are you feeling about Quentin Lake versus Cameron Curl? Because this is a pretty common question I get. Quentin Lake's been more productive for sure through 2 games here. I have him as safety 8 heading into the week, and Cameron Curl is like safety 27. Lake just not playing as much deep where Curl is, right? Yep. And Lake's mostly splitting his time in the slot in the box, which has really helped. So it's not like Curl's been bad. He had 8 tackles last week, which is a really good number for a safety. He's just been overshadowed by Lake. So any preference for one of these two?
I've been a big fan of Quentin Lake. Before the season when Curl got there, and then the Ernest Jones trade, it was like it's going to be Cameron Curl season. I was like set on Curl getting all those box looks. He played a lot of that look when he was in Washington. Now he comes here. There's no real linebacker anymore. And all of a sudden it's going to be Curl, and then they just like you said, you jinxed it, and Curl's playing everything deep, and Lake is in that slot position, which we'd love to see. So, yeah, Lake is easily a safety 1 for me week in and week out, and Curl is probably maybe early DB2 for me right now. Like it's just kind of that alignment just isn't justified. So, and just to follow up with that Reader, I'm probably going to lose my IDP show card and stuff like that, but like you said, Mason this week is he's just going to run the ball. Like he's ran the ball more than any running back in the previous 2 weeks. Game script, they're going to be up more than likely. They're going to be salting this one away. Reader is just going to like soak up those tackles at the end of the game. So, he already has 16 combined tackles this season in 2 games. That's, 16 more than anyone thought he was going to have this season. So.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We just we follow the snaps, and Troy Reader's 100% snap player in a good defense for production and in a great matchup this week. So why not put him into lineups and expect
just
more?
Just like we all thought.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Let's go to the Baltimore Ravens and the Dallas Cowboys next. Where do you want to start with either of these two teams?
I'll start with Baltimore. Kyle Hamilton, like you kind of alluded to earlier, we had a couple defensive backs, Cameron Curl, a little bit disheartening where he's been playing. Kyle Hamilton's been kind of in that same boat for me too. Just hasn't had the Kyle Hamilton draft pedigree games that we've expected to have. They've had some games like that Vegas game that should have been a totally Kyle Hamilton game. I don't know why they were letting Simpson just get abused by Brock Bowers again and again and again. It's fine for my Brock Bowers shares, but Baltimore should have recognized that, Simpson's not the coverage linebacker that they would put Kyle Hamilton on. That's where he excels and stuff like that. And they just didn't do that. So he's kind of a DB2 for me right now going forward until we see anything from him. It's hard to bench him because you have a lot invested in him. Because if you have him, you had to take him early, and it's kind of hard to sit a player that draft capital for you. So.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him. Like he's in that safety 2 range for me as well. Like nothing's really changed with Kyle Hamilton. He's playing the exact same deployment as he was last season when he was getting the large majority of his snaps in the slot and in the box, which is around 75% combined there. So he just hasn't been like an overly effective tackler. And part of that is the Ravens defense as well. Like, they do run much more man coverage than most teams, which, that has Hamilton turning and running in coverage a lot more than he's able to kind of sit in zone and face the line of scrimmage. He just has a lot of his time spent with his back to the play, right? Which, just logically that isn't going to be great for tackle opportunities. So he'll still have his big games if they're blitzing and things like that. But, I think it was actually this time last year that he had like his 3-sack game. I think that came in week 3, if I remember correctly, or right around there. But, as far as consistency goes, like it just might be more difficult for him to produce strong tackle numbers in this defense in that role. You look at other teams around the league, more man heavy teams, and you look at their nickel corners, and a lot of them are well below average as far as tackle efficiency goes. So, looking at some of the most man-heavy teams in the league right now, Jerrion Jones in Jacksonville, below average tackler, Jaquan McMillian in Denver, Amik Robertson in Detroit, Cameron Mitchell in Cleveland, Nate Hobbs in Las Vegas. Those are all the primary nickel corners in some of the most man-heavy defenses in the league this season, and they're all below average in tackle efficiency so far. So Hamilton, he gets a little bit more work at safety and stuff like that, so that helps him bring his numbers up slightly, but there's still a big chunk of his game that is kind of cut down by a lot of that, turning and running in coverage. So I think he just could be a little bit more boom bust this year.
John, do you think that has anything to do with passing as a whole is down? We saw like the numbers from week 1 and week 2, passing touchdowns are down. So obviously as the passing's down, these players are going to have fewer opportunities. You think there's a direct correlation between the offenses right now kind of struggling, and then, obviously have the defenses struggling as a result of that?
It definitely it plays a part in it, right? Like we know, for tackle production for those players that are playing around the line of scrimmage, it's almost double when teams run the ball compared to when they're passing the ball. So there's definitely more opportunity for, run plays to create tackles and production for IDPs. But yeah, it just hasn't been the case for some of these guys like a Kyle Hamilton, for example, who's playing in a coverage role because the team plays more man defense, where he's still, if a wide receiver's, running 5 yards downfield before he starts to run block or something like that, he's still got to kind of turn and run with him, right? They're going to play man coverage there. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but it definitely could play a part in it. Like, yeah, there's less opportunity, I guess, for, players that are more coverage players to get opportunities when there's not as much passing is the kind of the short way to answer that. I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. And it makes sense too. Like if you have these nickel guys who's their predominant role is to cover, tight ends, running backs coming out of the backfield and stuff like that. That's they're going to be their first step is going to be a drop step or whatever it might be. So, it just kind of it all correlates for sure.
Yeah. And then on the Dallas side of things, I mean, the linebackers, right? I feel like that's got to be the main topic of conversation. Do you feel comfortable with anybody outside of Eric Kendricks in this group?
Well, let's see. Week 1, it was a Damarian Overshown week. Last week, it was a
Damone Clark.
Damone Clark week. So I guess we're back to Overshown in week 3. So, if you want to play that game, go ahead. But Kendricks for sure is the only one that you even feel safe rolling out. Should be a really good matchup for him. He should be, Lamar Jackson's run the ball a lot. You got Derrick Henry, so you should be a pretty decent game for them.
Yeah. Like it for Kendricks. We gotta get more consistency as far as usage goes out of the rest of the linebackers there. Like you said, Damone Clark last week. I mean, it could be Maris Lufau this week. Like, we just don't know what they're doing. They're kind of plugging and playing guys all over the place. So just trusting Eric Kendricks until we see something emerge more consistently among the second linebacker, whoever that ends up being in Dallas, or maybe it just stays a mess like this and we could only trust Eric Kendricks.
It's been the theme of the league. A couple teams are running the script and going with it. So
it's true. That's true. It's not uncommon. So let's go to Sunday night football now, and we will cover the Kansas City Chiefs at the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll start with Nick Bolton and the Kansas City Chiefs linebackers, because Nick Bolton still getting 100% of snaps, but 9.1% tackle efficiency on the year. Really, really poor. The Chiefs are another one of those man-heavy defenses, so that doesn't help. I still think he'll be fine kind of rest of season, but right now it's just kind of like LB20 for me this week. Like, through 2 games, Atlanta hasn't been a great matchup for opposing linebackers either. So Bolton isn't necessarily a must start, but I think he's still, again, like 100% player. If you don't have other players that see that snap share, then he's going to be a starter for you, and you just hope for the best. So still early in the season before, panicking on Bolton, but how are you feeling about the Chiefs linebackers?
Yeah. Outside of Nick Bolton, I don't trust them to play. I know that Bobby and Adam have got this guy kind of going back and forth all the time with Leo Chenault and stuff like that. But Chenault's another one of those players that's just too efficient. He's just doing too well with the snaps. He was only played 80 snaps this season, but he's among the league leaders in, a lot of those categories. And so is it a product because he's so fresh and he's just able to make those plays when he's out there, or is should he be getting more run in that defense, because he's only played about half the snaps that Bolton has had, but he's right on par as far as snaps. So is there something to his efficiency with being fresh? I don't know, but outside of Bolton, I have a really hard time starting either him or Drew Tranquill. So
no, I'm with you. And then Chris Jones is probably the only other one that's worth talking about as well. Like, he's DT1 for me, likely, one of the best bets, if not the best bet at the position to hit double-digit sacks on the season. Just has elite pass rush ability. He draws one of the more favorable matchups this week to keep that kind of going here against Atlanta Falcons right guard Chris Lindstrom, who has been a good guard for his career. He just really struggled to start the year. I don't know if he's maybe not healthy or what's going on, but right now he ranks 64th among 65 qualifying guards in pass blocking grade with a 27.7. He's allowed 8 pressures through 2 games. That's tied for the most. So Kirk Cousins has done a decent job so far this season, not allowing pressures to turn into sacks, which has been nice. But Jones, I think, should still be considered in a great spot, even as like a low floor tackle type of interior defender. The Falcons have also allowed the 11th most tackles per game to the opposing defensive lineman early in the season. So maybe he falls into a tackle here and there, but I still like Jones just for the pass rush upside alone.
Yeah, I think very few players can just like take over a game at any given moment. And I think Chris Jones has that ability to do that. And I really like what he's done for George Karlaftis on the outside. Karlaftis has a lot of great pressures. He's up to like 10 pressures. And I think the stat correction gave him a sack already from last week. He got a stat correction today, which gave him a sack. So, obviously he's reaping the benefits of playing next to Chris Jones. The only other option for the Chiefs that I really like this season so far has been Justin Reed. He's been a great option at safety super consistent. Like I say before, anytime we get consistency at a very inconsistent position, sign me up. And Justin Reed has been that guy this year. So he's a nice option for you there. So, if we kind of look at the linebackers in Atlanta, we flip the script here. At least we got a little clarity this week, like with Anderson being out, or with Landman, going on IR. Instead of having 3 linebackers, now we've got 2 for sure. Caden Ellis and then Anderson there. So he's a solid option if he's still on your waiver wires. He shouldn't be anymore. So he's again. Anytime we have fewer players to choose from and we get our players on the field for more snaps, that's what we want. And so thank you, Nate Landman, for going on IR for a couple weeks and making this a little easier. So give you a shout out, buddy.
Yeah, we always appreciate when things are simplified a little bit. And Atlanta definitely showed us that on Monday night last week, giving 2 full-time roles and another one of those zone-heavy defenses as well there in Atlanta. So it could be nice for the tackle efficiency for Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis. And then the other piece of Atlanta too, Jesse Bates has been playing a lot more in the box through the first 2 games of the season than he has really in his entire career, just based on his season averages. But I don't know. There's still some hesitancy from me, at least, in believing, that this is going to be kind of the norm for him for 2024. I'd probably rank him a little bit higher this week if I knew for sure that he was going to be that box heavy safety. Like, he's safety 13. He's not low or anything like that, but playing, I think, against an offense like Kansas City with obviously a deadly passing game, I think he's going to be playing deep a lot more than he did in the first 2 games when he faced more run heavy offenses there. So still within range of that top 12 for me, because again, the passing offense does help those deeper safeties still a little bit, but I think there could be, some optimism at least to take from Jesse Bates's alignment early in the year when they are facing those run heavy defenses that, he is going to get some box usage, which should help those tackle numbers quite a bit.
Yeah, I think if Justin Simmons is going to have a week, this is the week. Like you said, playing deep, he's going to get a lot of run. He's been playing deep safety 66% of the time already. I mean, that's his role. That's what he does. Yeah. He did it in Denver. That's Justin Simmons doing Justin Simmons things. So I think if there's a week that you have him on your lineup, this would be the week to probably get him in. You're going to see a lot of those deeper looks with Rashee Rice and Worthy there. I think that this will be the week for Simmons.
Yep, I like that call. Okay, let's go to we got 2 Monday Night Football games happening almost at the same time, which that one of the things that drives me crazy. Like, just put them back to back. I don't want to be flipping on a Monday night, but Jacksonville and Buffalo is the first one here. Jeff, where do you want to start with these 2?
We kind of already mentioned the linebackers with Jacksonville, with Foyalou kind of not being the 100% guy that he was in last season. Even Devin Lloyd hasn't been the linebacker that he has been drafted to be this season. So Jacksonville's got some weird things going on. They're playing some really interesting defense. They're subbing their players out. Even their safeties, Antonio Johnson, I thought was going to really have a solid season this year. He's leading the team in snaps, but he's played almost all of his snaps in deep safety. He's played 105 of his 143 snaps deep. And it's not at the loss of someone else. Adrian Cisco has played 100 of his 131 snaps deep. So this team is clearly playing 2 deep safety sets for whatever reason. They're rotating their linebackers. I just wanted to have one box safety, and I was kind of putting my chips in on Antonio Johnson being the guy this week. But, he did get a QB pressure last week, so maybe that's a sign of things to come for him. Buffalo seems like a pretty solid matchup for, the secondary here with the linebackers in the secondary here. So, we'll see, but Antonio Johnson's probably a hold, probably not going to be in my starting lineup, but holding out hope. I got a lot of players I'm holding out hope on. So
yeah, it's still early. Don't give up hope just yet. But yeah, I'm with you.
Got that hopium going. Hopium,
exactly.
Right? Is that what
that's right? Yeah. That's right. Yeah, like you mentioned with the Jacksonville linebackers, it is an interesting situation with Ryan Nielsen coming in as the new defensive coordinator. We talked about it last week. We talked about it a bunch of times already. But Foye, 82% of snaps last week. Devin Lloyd, 67%, coming off a lot on obvious passing down. So both were productive last week, and the Bills are a decent matchup for linebackers so far. So it could work out again, but it just feels like we're playing with fire, trusting these guys too heavily rest of season with those types of snap shares. Like, it just feels like a house of cards that could result in poor production at any point. And if we get a streak of that poor production as well, which is also likely given the snap shares, it's what worries me. So I think I have Foye LB 18 this week, because again, like, I trust him in a less than full-time snap share more than probably any linebacker, but Devin Lloyd 67% is again the projection. Like, he's LB 50 for me. I can't trust it. So outside of that startable range really. And the other piece, Josh Allen versus Josh Allen, or Josh Hines Allen, I guess now. I'm kind of mixing that up, but it's probably the tougher matchup for Josh Hines Allen of the two here, because the Bills have such a strong pass blocking unit. Also, Josh Allen, the quarterback, not prone to taking a lot of sacks so far this season. That being said, Josh Hines Allen, top 5 pass rush grade for the position for the year, got a sack last week. I have him as edge 7. I still really like his potential just because he has that elite pass rush ability. Trayvon Walker, I'm probably tempering a little bit. He's edge 30 for me this week. It's again, a tougher matchup against the Bills.
Yeah, I'm with you. It should be fun.
Yeah. And then on the Buffalo side of things, obviously we saw Terrell Bernard last week on Thursday night have the that was a pec strain as well, right? Yeah. Yep. So yeah, like you said. So what are your thoughts on the Bills linebacker situation now with Terrell Bernard potentially hurt? Well, or is hurt. He's likely not going to play.
Yeah. Well, if I have my choice, obviously in a vacuum, I'm probably going to be taking Dorian Williams. He's been on the field already. He was there already, and he was playing. He was playing well, very productive. Balen Spector is probably not a terrible option. I have him kind of in the LB3, LB4 territory this week. He came in, played really, really well. Could Buffalo kind of throw some water on the Balen Spector and throw out a Joe Andreessen? We saw him kind of become really relevant during the preseason. And so, if anything is going to happen this season, that's probably going to happen. I know Balen Spector was a huge waiver wire ad this week for many managers in many leagues. And, that's very 2024, to see, all of a sudden Joe Andreessen is the leader of the Buffalo Bills linebacking core, but I guess it's early enough in the season. We don't have to panic too much. We're only at worst, you're going to be 0-3. It's not unsalvageable. You can always come back from that. That's part of the game. So.
Yeah, it was a weird situation last week. Yeah, but Balen Spector, he stepped right into a full-time role when Terrell Bernard left the game. He wore the green dot. I assume that's going to be the case again this week, where because Dorian Williams remained in kind of his sub-package role, coming off the field a little bit on passing downs. Joe Andreessen, he was inactive last week, but like you said, I mean, they liked him in the preseason. There's at least a chance, right, that he works his way in there. So I'm not desperate to get Balen Spector into my lineups, but if you're in need of a full-time linebacker, we could definitely do worse here. And then Greg Rousseau, Von Miller as well. I think both of these guys look really good. I mean, Von Miller, I'm probably not trusting just because the snap share is not quite there yet, but Greg Rousseau should see enough of Anton Harrison of the Jaguars to kind of bounce back this week. He was quiet last week. But yeah, the Jags right tackle owns the 66th ranked pass blocking grade out of 68 qualifiers. Trevor Lawrence also bottom 10 in the league in pressure to sack conversion rate. So could be a nice spot for Gregory Rousseau to come in there. I think I have him as edge 9 this week. Yeah, like Rousseau quite a bit.
It's nice that they finally unlocked him and let him
beautiful
play. So one last guy I have for Buffalo is Taylor Rapp. With all these injuries, he was another one of those players. Like, it just made sense for him to play more in the box. Like we saw the Cameron Curl thing, and that didn't come to fruition here in Buffalo. They kind of did the same thing to us here. Taylor Rapp, in his time with the Rams, he kind of played a lot of that box role, and he was very good earlier in his career. And it just kind of made sense that he was going to take that role and do it too. But here, we're seeing, of his 132 snaps this season, he's played 81 of them at free safety, and he's only played about 50 of them in the box. So great volume, playing a lot of snaps. We're just not seeing those snaps where we want him to be aligned. Is that something they make an adjustment on now with, the linebackers being moved around a little bit? Not sure if that's really going to be his role here in Buffalo, but, based on volume, like Taylor Rapp's probably, borderline LB or defensive back 2-3. He's probably on the borderline of being a starter for many teams and across leagues, but we just want to see him get a few more box snaps, I think. So,
yeah. Yep, I like that call. Could definitely be possible. I think that, suits his skill set a little bit more as well, like you said. So the other Monday night football game is the Washington Commanders at the Cincinnati Bengals. So just quickly, I mean, Jeremy Chin, I spoke on him on the recap pod a little bit. He was only a 79% player in week 1, but did get up to 100% in week 2. Box usage is kind of fine, though nothing exceptional. I think it was 32% last week. Also got 16% on the defensive line, 20% in the slot, just 30% deep. So not too bad. Like there are definitely worse usages out there than Jeremy Chin. And I'm not saying you have to start Chin or even keep him because he hasn't been productive, but might not be as over for him as first expected after week 1, right? When he wasn't playing a full-time role. So we'll see how things kind of shake out here. Just kind of maybe a potential hold for me. But again, there's so many other safety options. You're not going to hold on for much more than in deep leagues. Other than that, the Commanders aren't as exciting as we'd hope them to be probably coming into the year, with Dan Quinn and the defense, like Bobby Wagner. I have him as LB 16, Frankie Louvu, LB 31, Dorrance Armstrong, edge 36, Jonathan Allen, DT 14, Daron Payne, DT 19. Daron Payne actually did bounce back from that low snap share of week 1 and played his normal 73% snap share with Jonathan Allen. So anybody else on Washington that's interesting to you?
No, just the note that I made here too, kind of piggybacking on your comment with Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. Between the two of them and Dorrance Armstrong, they have 17 combined pressures already in the season, so they're getting a lot of pressure up the middle, and that is without Jerzon Newton, who is like active for the first time this last game. So I think once he gets active and gets acclimated to NFL and gets his feet back under him after his injury, their interior defensive line is going to be pretty amazing. I think he's a mountain of a man, and so I think that's where they're going to get a lot of their pressures from is in the middle, because I don't see it coming from the outside right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then the last team of the week, the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, pretty easy team as well. Like Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, like they've both been excellent so far. I think I got Logan Wilson as LB 11 this week. Jermaine Pratt is LB 17. Trey Hendrickson in a nice spot as usual. Like he's edge 15 for me this week. Like he is going to face kind of a rotating left tackles, which we've seen from Washington, which has been interesting. Cornelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman, the rookie. Brandon Coleman has not been good in pass blocking so far as a rookie, 70th of 71 qualifiers in pass blocking grade. Cornelius Lucas has been much better, 80.1 pass blocking grade, which is 12th. And he's the technical starter that's probably going to play more against Trey Hendrickson, but Trey Hendrickson, one of the great pass rushers in the league. So still like him as an IDP starter this week, of course. But yeah, he's always one that's kind of struggled with a tackle floor as well. So that's why he just sits outside the top 12 for me this week.
Yeah, especially playing for a contract year this year. This is the season to fire up Hendricks across, and playing against Washington, the metric shows here that they're a good team against a defensive line or a defensive line to score well. And I think when you have a running quarterback like Jaden Daniels, they typically hold the ball a little bit longer than they need to. So creating a little more opportunity for Hendricks to have a solid week. So,
yep, I'm with you. Anything else from this final game here?
No, I feel like we just ran a marathon, dude.
We did run a marathon. That was a monster episode, man. But I really appreciate you going through this for 2 hours with me and breaking down all this stuff. But yeah, that is going to do it for us here for week 3, our IDP preview. So hopefully that helps you guys get your lineup set this week. But as always, feel free to shout questions in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you all for tuning in and the support. And if you'd be so kind to like and subscribe or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, whatever you want to do, I'd greatly appreciate that as well. But very importantly, a huge thank you to the man, Jeff Pomazal, for coming on, giving us much more than an IDP minute to share his thoughts. Jeff, really appreciate you doing this, man. And before you go, please let everyone else know what you got going on for the rest of this season.
Yeah. So I'm dropping every Wednesday night, Thursday morning. We're doing the IDP update, which is just basically the IDP minute on steroids, taking a week's worth of news and just kind of condensing it down to less than 10 minutes. And then on Sunday mornings, myself and a guest are doing the live stream to help you out with some lineup decisions. So once we get the information with the final ins and outs, and we'll help you out. So that's awesome. Where we're at.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely check out Jeff and his work. And then as for me, IDP fantasy report for this week is linked in the episode description. That'll give you access to all the waiver targets, snap shares, and usage and notes for every single IDP. I'll also link my IDP articles in the episode description as well as the IDP rankings article, as well as the link to the rankings page where updates closer to Sunday will be inputted. I'll also be back Monday morning with a quick recap / takeaways video that I'll record after Sunday Night Football, which has been fun to do, and glad you guys have been continuing to tune in for that. But other than that, thank you all again. Good luck in week 3. And until next time, peace out.